All right, I'm very excited to introduce Dr. Andrew Patton as our closing keynote. He's the Director of Player and Health and Safety Data Science for the National Football League. Works with stakeholders and vendors across the league for data-driven research in a variety of domains that you're going to see today. Prior to the NFL, he spent time working for the Centers for Disease Control, probably have heard of them, in stats perform, in addition to time in healthcare and scientific consulting. He has significant experience working in human performance, strength, and conditioning in collegiate athletics. Some of his public portfolio includes the front-end work for Darko and several other basketball NBA-focused web apps, as well as articles in The Athletic and Nylon Calculus. He previously received his BS in molecular toxicology from UC Berkeley, his MS in environmental management from the University of San Francisco, and his PhD in exposure science and environmental epidemiology from Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Now that is quite the background. And he continues to remain active in academia as an adjunct professor at the University of San Francisco and as an advisor to the Yuma Center for Excellence in Desert Agriculture at the University of Arizona. So let's give a big round of applause for Andrew for joining us today.
Welcome everybody, hello. Yeah, we'll get into it today with player health and safety data science, and thanks to Ron for the introduction and this great conference. So who am I? As Ron said, I'm the director of player health and safety data science, background in a lot of life sciences in particular. Primarily this is about, the background here is to show you that I'm not a super quantitative, I'm not a mathematician, not a statistician, not a computer scientist. I've spent lots of time in laboratories with pipettes, I've spent time in the field, all sorts of this broad kind of life sciences, public health, exposure science work. I don't have my current job because I am some quantitative genius. I have my current job because of this broad domain, this expertise in doing science. And we'll get to kind of follow, that's kind of the thread, is that this is a science part of data science. So the NFL structure, I work in a group called Data and Analytics. We provide data and analytics to other groups inside the NFL. So that means our group works with football operations, which is the act of doing football. The act of doing football, as well as things like fan engagement, media, TV ratings, anything that really touches on the sport. We have engineers, data scientists, analysts, project managers, product managers, everything that a corporation needs to function and run the NFL. The player health and safety part is an entirely separate division. This is built into the CBA that non-NFL employees, a company called IQVIA, need to report injuries to the NFLPA. So there's a little bit of a wall between what I can and cannot access. BioCore is a biomechanical and engineering consulting group that also works with us to test equipment, surfaces, mechanisms, injuries, do all sorts of things involving the physics of health and safety in football. This is a big team effort. Just because I am the person here today talking does not mean I am the person who does everything individually that I will be talking about. This is a very big team all across the country, a lot of really, really smart people. Of our group in the data science team, kind of in the data analytics group, there are, at the moment, this is it. We're growing, but this is it at the moment. Mike Lopez, who I'm sure many of you know, either from reputation or in person, he's a statistician, he leads our group. Tom Bliss, Adley Blake, Maypin Sabaya all work on the football operations side of the shop, kind of things related very, very explicitly on equity, officiating, all sorts of things, while Maypin in particular builds our TV ratings work. On the kind of player health and safety side of the shop, myself, Carly Fennell and Ashani Desai do most of the work. And again, a lot of this is cross-functional. I work with Mike, Carly worked with Tom, et cetera, but this is kind of the loose divisions of labor. And on the officiating side, we have Sean McKee and Jack Persenpire. All of us work together. This is very much not a one person does one thing situation. We work together on these multidisciplinary problems, and this is very much a collaborative effort. And you can see here our backgrounds are pretty diverse. We have statistics, physics, business analytics, nuclear engineering, biomechanical engineering, exposure science, and epidemiology, and then just computer science. So a pretty well-rounded group. So What do I do at the NFL is kind of a difficult question, because what I do is not limited to what my title is, and I can kind of explain how that ends up being. So I have two real roles. One mentions the player health and safety data science, and the other one is kind of analytical governance. So I kind of split these loosely into process and results. Player health and safety work is, for what I do, relatively narrow. There are specific projects and specific research questions we have to answer. I don't have carte blanche to go digging around player health information to just look around. For a variety of reasons, that is not what I do. We work with Biocore and IQVIA to help provide football-specific context to questions. You know, not all injuries we work with. So we work with some things. How does this happen on the football field? What is the scheme associated? What is the play call? Why is this happening? So we provide the kind of third leg of the analytical, pyramid or tripod of football context within health and safety. A lot of what we do is presented to the competition committee. A lot of what we do never sees the light of day. That's how science works sometimes. But that's kind of a results-focused thing. We're looking very specific, very narrow. The analytical governance is kind of my broader role. It's an internal-facing role at the league, and I kind of work across all data analytics to ensure that we have a really good structure and process to kind of create reproducible, versioned, high-quality work regardless of the complexity or the topic. This holds true, if we work in revenue optimization or TV ratings or our football operations work. The process and tooling has to be good. It has to be bulletproof. It has to work as the bus problem or the Swiss cheese problem, where no failures, independent of all of our personnel as well. So it's kind of a broad kind of oversight role. Moving back to kind of the player health and safety side of the shop, the 10,000-foot view is that on-field activity is where we focus. How does explicitly the on-field activity impact the health of the players, and in particular, the football context? How do we measure injuries? How do we determine what are preventable and what are not? And again, this is a massive team effort. I'm saying we, and this is the larger we at the NFL. There are really three data sources we use primarily. NGS, for all of you, that's the tracking data. That's the models. If you watch the Thursday night broadcast with the special feed, all that is NGS with the overlays. That's our traditional tracking data, event level information, coverage classification, player position classification, all sorts of the high-end stuff. Then you have your traditional box score, play-by-play, how many rushing yards, how many passing yards, your basics, and then injury information. My role at the NFL means that I do not get access to player medical records. I am not a physician. That is beyond the firewall for me. I can see if a player broke their collarbone. I don't know anything else beyond that. It is not my job. It is not my expertise to investigate past that, and I'm not legally allowed to. What else do I do? All of this. We're going to cover the red almost rectangles today, but everything we see here, I have a part in it, some component. Some of it's little, some of it's big, but this is what the governance role does, and the fact that we are a multifunctional group that recruits people and has people that are broad, generalists who understand how to figure things out. So a lot of this is what I do on my day-to-day. And this covers evolution of the game. How are the personnel trends? How are the schematic trends? How are things just different than they were 5, 10, 15 years ago? The financial side of the shop, the business side of the shop, I work on building predictive models and kind of governing the data collection and the reporting process there. Special teams, competitive equity, big data bowl. All sorts of other things, roster composition, rule proposals, recruiting, everything. So we have a pretty broad domain, and I work in all these pieces depending on the day of the week. I consume a pretty stupid amount of sports content and football content in particular. Because of my broad kind of job requirements, I have to know the trends. I have to know what's happening. I have to be able to think about what are the questions I'm going to get asked 6 months from now, 6 weeks from now, 2 years from now. So this isn't just Sundays I watch games. I read local writers, I read national writers, podcasts, X's and O reviews, morning shows, film review, all sorts of stuff, because I have to understand across the whole league where we're going on a lot of different fronts. I also need to understand where the other sports are going. Because of the business ramifications, because of we like borrowing ideas and going back and forth, I also have to understand how those work. So I consume a lot of content. I get a lot of money's worth out of my athletic subscription. This is kind of, I think, a drastically oversimplified but good way to think about how my role differs from that of a team. In the universe of football, I go a couple feet deep all the way across, whereas a team might go all the way to the bottom, but only a couple feet across. It's not my job to help a team. I have to help all the teams. And anything we do isn't about winning games. It's about ensuring that all 32 can function properly, both now and in the future. So it's never a situation where, oh, this team A, we have to help them win next week, or help them particularly at the expense of the other teams. It's all, everything we do has to benefit all 32. This also goes into the data we can access. If you are a team employee, you can access information about what you do in practice, schematic things you might be talking about, specific other kind of player tracking information that you do in your own building. I do not get any of that. I get the league-wide view, the NGS stuff. So I don't know what happens essentially at their facilities, because again, competitive secrets, and the CBA, but I do know all the teams some information. So the TLDR here is that my job at the NFL is to create an analytical ecosystem of people, technology, and data where we can answer questions either proactively or reactively in a reproducible and scalable manner. We will get text messages early in the morning, say, hey, I need you to look this up. We also get says, hey, 2 years from now, we're thinking we might do this. So we have to be able to work on a variety of timescales, and these can be, quick, I'm in a meeting, I need you to find me something, which we've all experienced that, or it can be, we're planning a multi-million-dollar initiative we're going to roll out in 2 years, let's think about it. So we need to have a system in place where we can answer all of these questions, and also ones we don't know are coming. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about today is push sneak. The first rule is that this is the only name for it. None of you are ever allowed to call it anything else. Those of you who haven't been following the NFL in the last 2 years, this has been a lot of words written about it, I'll put it like that. I think this is actually an interesting example of how we combine very high-tech and very low-tech solutions to kind of come up again with this system where we can answer questions that people don't know they want to ask until it's 6 months down the line. So this is a team. Obviously, other people work on this as well, but in particular, it's the three people here. This is me, Ananya Singh, and Juliana Bushnell. They're both from Emory and were referred to me through a colleague of ours, and they work as kind of analysts on this project with me. So let's talk about quarterback sneaks. One of the potentially most interesting or least interesting plays in football, depending on your opinion. A traditional quarterback sneak here is, if you watch football, you've seen it. The quarterback lines up under center, takes the snap, and immediately moves upfield. There is nothing going on behind him. The goal is to get a yard, 2 yards maybe, right? It's straight upfield, straight away, no real deception, no real anything going on. Very simple, but some teams are surprisingly good at it. Historically, the mid-2010s Patriots were quite good at this. They would quick sneak. If any of you are Patriots fans, that was a guaranteed way that they'd tempo up to the line and get 4 yards, pretty much guaranteed. But yeah, this is the traditional quarterback. This is not something that's new. It's been going on forever all over the football. The push sneak is also not new. It has just gotten a lot of press recently. Some examples here are on the left. This is Derek Carr back when he's on the Raiders. And as a really good example, this is a quarterback sneak. You can see the fullback do this. The next 3 frames are him going that way. And his goal is to push the quarterback. At this point, it is irrelevant for us if he actually makes contact with the quarterback, because it's pretty clear what his intentions are. The Eagles kind of turn it up a notch, a little more sophistication, and do what we would call like a triangle formation where there's a quarterback and one on the left and one on the right. And you can see again, I believe that's A.J. Brown on the top left doing the arm almost extension. This is the push sneak. It's a obvious, direct, immediate attempt to push the quarterback forwards. You can also see this in what we call an indirect sneak, which is a little bit, if you think of more like a split flow action where a wide receiver or a tight end might kind of fold behind the quarterback after the snap. It's hard to know if that's intentional or just the player's freelancing, but that's like the gray area in between. In general, we found that running backs, tight ends, wide receivers in general tend to split this pretty evenly as the pushers. Recently, we've been seeing a lot more tight ends and a lot more creativity with some of the tight ends taking the snap directly as well. There we go. So what's the point? Why am I doing this? All flavors are sneaks, whatever your incorrect name for them are or not. You're essentially making a trade-off. You are deciding, I'm willing to trade off the fact that I'm never going to get 10 yards on this play for a pretty good chance of getting 2 yards. I think 1 out of all the sneaks on record have gotten more than 10 yards. It was Dak Prescott. I'm going to show it in the next play. It was a major whoops by the Bears. It's a low chance of a turnover, although there have been some recently. And again, it's a trade-off. It's moving the levers around. Where's your risk profile, right? It's a strategy question. From 2017 to 2022, the rate of quarterback sneaks has increased from 0.4 per game to 1.1 per game. There's been a lot of coverage on this because it looks a little different. It looks a little new. Anyone have an idea as to why, some thoughts on why that might have increased from 17 to 22? Kind of an obvious answer in some aspects.
That's a great play.
Are more teams going for it on 4th and 1?
Quarterbacks are bigger.
Oh.
They're bigger, they're stronger, right? Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, these are big dudes. There's also been a lot of media coverage on the sneak, a lot of coverage. These are just some examples I pulled, but in general, there's been a lot of public reporting on it, some of it very good, some of it not good. It's also a good example that there is definitely an eye of the beholder in the data collection. This isn't like how many incompletions somebody threw. You could say this is a push sneak, and then someone else says, no, this is not, and you both work for football teams. So there's very much a gray area where our confidence intervals here are large, for sure. This is the play where Dak Prescott ran for like 30 yards or something. This was just a mistake. But this is the only one on record where there are quite a few other plays on 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1 that are run plays or pass plays where you could, throw a 70-yard touchdown. So you are, again, this is the idea of shifting your risk and your success in one direction or another. How do we collect the data? If you have ever done scientific research, you know that data collection is often the hardest part of it. It's got real-life implications of time and money. And we have to collect data before we answer any questions. I will add that this is an example of us realizing this ahead of time. We started collecting this data last year because we could tell that this was coming down. Someone was going to ask questions about this coming down the road. One of the trickiest parts about data collection, if you've done this before, you almost always get one shot at this. You very rarely get to go back and say, whoops, let's collect all the data again with 2 more new variables. That doesn't happen unless you have a lot more money and a lot more time than any project I've ever worked on. So again, you need to anticipate what are the questions I'm trying to answer and what are the questions I think other people will want answered. Those are not always the same thing, right? And it's important to note that the research question that you have isn't the question other people have and might not get the same answer, right? So this is a pretty simple flow here. I wrote an algorithm, and when I say algorithm, I mean I filtered for quarterback runs on short yardage over a certain amount of time. 1,500 plays or so on our data set over the last 4 or 5 years, and we had our film review interns and analysts review them, manually review them. I also reviewed all these. So it takes time and money to collect this information. We had a set of data points we wanted to collect, some information that we could not get from the tracking data. It's very easy to say, to pick formations out with X's and Y's, pretty hard to do at scale, were their arms extended? How far away from the line of scrimmage did the pusher make contact with the quarterback? Things like that, like is this a direct or indirect? Was this part of the intention of the play? All sorts of these questions we had to come up with ahead of time. What formation? Did players jump over the line of scrimmage? So for example, our NFL tracking data does not have Z. So if you remember, for example, like the Ravens-Bengals game last year, quarterback sneak on the goal line to touchdown, he went over the top. So we have to manually review that in the moment to check that out. We came up with about 1,200 sneaks, so props to my algorithm for being pretty good at filtering. And within that was the traditional sneaks, the direct sneaks, which are the immediate and obvious pushes, as well as the indirect sneaks, which are a little bit of the more nebulous, hard to determine if this was intentional or accidental. Some competition and football findings. Fun fact, this has been online for over a year on the NFL operations, football operations blog, so this is not breaking any news. again, those things that we knew we wanted this chart before we collected the data. And this is kind of the motivating, and we'll obviously collect more on top of this, but we had this result in mind. This was the table we wanted to show. Show the efficacy of the different methods at different places in the field. Why are sneaks more effective the further away you are from the other end zones? Anybody?
Smaller bodies in the game.
Play action.
Close.
Less DB stacked up.
What happens if you sell out on defense from the other teams on their own goal line and you're wrong?
Touchdown.
Yeah, 99-yard touchdown. That's bad. The other alternative is if it's the other way around, you have to sell out because they're probably going to score anyway, so you might as well roll the dice. That's why sneaks are more effective the further away you are from scoring. Holds true across the different types. In general, we found that the push sneaks were about the same as traditional sneaks, aggregated across the whole league. Some teams are better than others, just like all other facets of football. What people thought, or some people, if you read certain articles, see that, oh, this is an unstoppable play that is 100% effective all of the time, no matter what. It is not and is not. So the question is, now what? Now it's out of my hands. We do some other stuff behind the scenes. We bring things up to kind of other internal NFL stakeholders when we talk about it, but this is kind of the version 1. We have updated this throughout the rest of the year, this season as well. But essentially, we did quite a bit of time, quite a bit of effort to figure out that this play is effectively the same as the other plays. And that's okay. That's our job. We don't always have to find some smoking gun result. This is still useful for us. So moving forward, we're doing surveillance on this. Any public health people will recognize the systematic and routine phrase of public health surveillance. That's my background there, that you need to be able to do this in the same way all the time in an automated fashion. Surveillance is not, oh, I should look at this again. It's every day, every Sunday, every Sunday, every Monday, every Thursday. We run the code, pull it out, analyze it for the next week. We are continuing data collection, keeping the data backwards compatible, but also adding new information. So for example, is it a push sneak if the pusher never actually touches the quarterback, but they tried to? I don't know, but we're collecting it. Is it a push sneak if the pusher makes contact with the quarterback after the quarterback is 2 yards past the line to gain? I don't know. Again, we're collecting this information because these are questions people we think are going to ask. So this is our workflow, my very fancy diagram here. I have some automated code that runs each week on Tuesdays, essentially, for the prior week. A non-year reviews it, feed it back into our cloud, feeds all the rest of our other work. So there is a human step involved here, and this is part of the process of doing science. There are people involved. And so we've spent a lot of time, and Ani and I have gone back and forth a lot on how do we classify these? What is a sneak? What is not a sneak? Or what different flavors? All right, we'll go on to the quarterback slide here. Same idea. We are trying to answer questions before people ask them. This is the team, same 3 people plus Mike. What is a quarterback slide? So a quarterback slide isn't technically a distinct play. It's not limited to quarterbacks. Any player can slide. Give themselves up is the term in the rule book. You, again, are talking about a risk profile here. You're exchanging a loss of opportunity for extra yards for an increased chance of not getting hit. Right? So think of that. So you're saying, in this play here, Jalen Hurts is saying, I'm going to slide because I don't want to get hit by these 3 guys. I'm okay trading this off in exchange for not getting hit, right? That should make sense. Now, if that was 4th down in the Super Bowl, I'm pretty sure he wouldn't slide, right? Because your risk profile changes. Contact, when you quarterback slide, it does not mean that if somebody grazes you with your pinky finger, they get a penalty. Unavoidable contact is not penalized. Players are moving very, very fast. There's a lot of traffic, and essentially it's if the quarterback is responsible for their own safety. If you slide too late in a way that prevents unavoidable contact and you get hit, the defender will not be penalized, assuming it's not in the head and neck. If you slide really early and guarantee, 10 yards away from anybody, guaranteeing that nobody's going to hit you, that's fine. You're also ensuring that you get fewer yards. How do we collect the data? This should look super familiar because it's the same team in roughly the same process, because this is how this works. Again, it's a combination of tracking data and human review. Again, my very fancy algorithm. About 5,000 plays, that's a little low. And then feed it to our two reviewers. We train, we talk, we discuss. We get about 1,500 slides out of it. Was this a slide to begin with? If you note, there is not a formal way of tracking that currently. What kind of slide was it? If anybody here Ravens fans? Baltimore Ravens fan, anybody? No? Oh, true. Good point. Well, you watch at least Ravens games then. Lamar Jackson does not slide the way that other quarterbacks do. He has a magic ability to just sit down. Okay? So the way he slides is different than a way that somebody like Justin Herbert would slide, right? A taller, a little slower. And so are those the same play? Kind of. But it's hard to say. So this kind of yes or no is a difficult question. So when did they slide? We can timestamp of when the slide initiation begins, and it isn't all as clean as this. Thank you to Jalen for this really good example. This is like, I would say, okay, slide start now. Were they contacted? Yes or no? And again, contact is hard to judge because again, if it's a vicious hit is obvious, but if you kind of flop on somebody and put your arms out, clearly trying to protect them, is that contact? Kind of. And then when in the play were they contacted? Were they sliding and hit contemporaneously, or was it after the fact? Why do we care? More quarterbacks are running than ever. More quarterbacks are getting run plays called. And there are more exposure events downfield. Really, the question here is, are slides actually preventative of contact? We could not answer that question. I mean, it's I think, right? But I think is not good enough. So we had to find out. So here's an example of a play from, I believe, last year, where Justin Fields gets hit very hard in the helmet after sliding. The player, Eric Kendricks, was ejected for this. This was a foul. Justin Fields started sliding. You can see here the yards of separation, about 2.65 yards of distance between himself and Eric Kendrick, their center of mass, at the start of the slide. Again, start of the slide is tricky because we had to tag that. And so if you can move it one frame or another, it could be a little different, but about a little over 2.5 yards. Our goal is to figure out, is that close enough? Whose fault is this? Obviously, the penalty of the player who's ejected because of the hit to the head. Is that too close in general to slide? Is it far enough away? Don't know. We had to find out. Mike and I are writing a paper. This is early access. Please don't publish this. One of the things we do at the league office is we don't do advocacy pieces. It's not my job to suggest strategy. It's our job to provide information and let people make other decisions based on that. So we like to classify downfield action in 4 different ways. And this is past the line of scrimmage, right? So the quarterback cannot throw the ball at this point. You can go out of bounds. You can slide. You can be tackled. And you can score a touchdown. Now, of course, you can score a touchdown and get drilled in the end zone. You can also get hit out of bounds. In general, in the aggregate, we think these are clean enough categories. We understand there's some nuance here we are not fully capturing. That is okay. Our goal is, you can see the archetypes of the quarterbacks here. Somebody like Lamar and Josh Allen, again, if you watch a lot of football, the contact they take is not the same. Like when they get tackled, it's not the same kind of contact. Lamar has that ability to kind of, sit down, like almost turn sideways and miss the big shots, while Josh is a very big, strong guy, right? He takes contact. Whereas someone more like Daniel Jones slides more, and Lamar doesn't slide very often because we have difficulty classifying some of his slides. So our goal is to explain and show how these 4 outcomes differ by quarterbacks over time, year over year, and between quarterbacks. It's over the last 5 or 6 years, and the goal here is not to say you should slide here or you should slide less or you should run out of bounds. That's not my job. That's up to the team and the player to make that decision. We just want to provide evidence. Here's what's happening. Draw your own conclusions. We'll also be releasing data on this, hopefully, where we have the games and plays of all these slides and people can go nuts with it. And so did we find a compelling result? We'll see. You'll have to read the paper. So next, I'll get into equipment tracking. This is one, I think, the most interesting initiatives we do at the NFL, because I'm pretty sure we're the only league that does this. So this is the team here. This is a bigger group. Carly, myself, Akash, and Ashani on the NFL side do this. And Player Health and Safety is involved with Ashley Pager, and then BioCore, our biomechanical consulting company. If you were at Women in Sports Data, these slides are lifted directly from Ashani, so full credit to her. This is one of my favorite pictures. We talk about exposure, at least I do, because that's the way I understand this stuff. That's the way I think about it. Football exposures in particular are complicated. There's a lot going on here. In this specific play, Derrick Henry is 6'3", 250, running 16.5 miles an hour, stiff-arming Josh Norman, who's 6 foot 200, running 18 miles an hour. It's week 5 of the 2020 season. They're playing on Bermuda grass, perennial ryegrass. Derrick Henry's had 5 carries in this game, 82 in his season, 804 in his career, 602 in his NCAA career. I forget what play this is run. I think it's a zone, something now to the left. I don't remember, but there's all sorts of this stuff in here. We're adding on to it. He's wearing a Riddell SpeedFlex True helmet, Douglas 25Z shoulder pads, Nike Alpha Menace Pro cleats. And there's other stuff that I didn't write in here, but I could fill up the whole page and 25 others. So it's a piece of the exposure puzzle. Equipment is. Why do we track equipment? We do it because Player Health and Safety can utilize it to make recommendations. This is a NFL and NFLPA joint recommendation from a few years ago of cleats based on performance on essentially certain types of turf and recommendations for safety, performance, all that kind of stuff. Lots of biomechanical testing done by BioCore. Things we look at, position-specific equipment. If you're if you're Devonta Smith versus Jordan Mailata, you're probably not going to want to wear the same shoe, right? Player preferences. Some players like heavier cleats, some players like lighter cleats, all sorts of different stuff. Equipment best buy dates. Should you have a pair of shoes sitting on equipment manager's shelf for 5 years, or will the glue degrade? Equipment mileage. What is the best equipment? All these kind of questions we're trying to answer. Functionally, what does this look like? We partner with Zebra, who also provides our NGS data, where there is RFID tags on every helmet, every pair of shoulder pads, every pair of cleats you see on television. All of them. We register those tags with the equipment, the brand, the size, the shape, all sorts of bits and pieces of information. You can see here, this is inside of a shoe, a literal RFID tag in there. And that on the right, Pittsburgh did that accidentally. Those little panels you see cut into the floor are scanners. So when a player walks out wearing a pair of shoes and a helmet and shoulder pads, ping, 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 we know what player, what they're wearing, all that stuff. This information is registered in Zebra's portal, and anything that gets missed, the equipment managers catch up after the game. The equipment managers are the real heroes here. They do a huge amount of work that very rarely gets publicized. We could not do this without their support, their effort, their total buy-in. They are tremendous partners in this. What does the data look like? 20-ish games per team, 32 teams, 46 players, 3 equipment items, and that's the minimum. In the preseason, there's way more players. We're now tracking practices as well, so now it's every practice. Helmets have 7 to 15 components. Shoes have 3 to 5 different data points with it. We capture all of this every game, those practices, every player, all season. We use this to essentially create automated database, automated ETL jobs and reports to player health and safety and the equipment manager to understand who's wearing what, when, and what. This is how this works. The process starts in NFL locker rooms, right? We have those scanners, we have the players, we have the equipment managers. When the equipment is scanned, Zebra records it in Zebra's platform. It's then pushed to the NFL data warehouse. Following that, we do cleaning, pre-processing, quality assurance checks. All this is automated. Thanks to one of our engineers in the house, actually. On generation, these reports are sent and uploaded to one of our central data hubs, so people who need to see it can see it. We sent 32 reports to the equipment managers. We sent some summary reports to our executives. Here's how this works cadence-wise. It would be way more convenient if games were only on Sunday, but they are not. Sunday, equipment is scanned for each game and appears in the virtual locker. On Monday, we also scan more things, but the prior week's practices is sent out. On Wednesday, we sent reports out for the prior week's games. Thursday, scan again. Friday, equipment reports are sent out to the THNS executive. Year-round, we do this. Obviously not in the off-season, but preseason games, regular season, playoffs. This is about a 2.5, 3-year-old program at this point. Over the last year and a half, through efforts of Ashley Pajar and Shani Desai in particular, We've dropped essentially our data quality has improved by a full 10x fold. We've improved with over 3/4 of players to now over 9 in 10 players with complete equipment. And we're providing in-person work. I cannot emphasize enough how important the human relationships are here. This is not a spreadsheet database only project. We have to work with people and convince them to help us, to do extra work for us. So what that means is you have to work with them, say, here's why we're doing this, here's what you're going to get out of this, and then give them that. They are very, very busy. Equipment managers have a very difficult schedule, any sport. NFL has very big rosters. It's a challenging job, and so adding more work to their plate has to come with a carrot, right? We have to say, here's why you're doing this. Here's some fun stuff that we've done from this. So last year, Guardian caps, kind of the egg crate foam things you see, were required during training camp on linemen and linebackers. This year, it was expanded to regular season and postseason practices with contact, and now includes running backs, fullbacks, and tight ends. We also track all of these Guardian caps. In 2021, lineman-specific helmets were developed. These are helmets that are specific to reduced forces where the most common impacts occur. 2023 season quarterback-specific helmets were developed. So again, what kind of head impacts they receive, we're reducing the forces in the problem areas. We also have individual cleats. And when I say individual, I mean full custom one-of-one cleats for players. You cannot buy these. They have a foot scanner, 3D model of your foot, custom inserts, custom shoes, custom everything. It's the future. Pretty cool. They have not let me get one yet. All right, so I'm going to end this talk with some career advice, mostly for students, but I think it applies for a lot of us as well. I'm going to start with a bad news slide. Unfortunately, there are a very finite number of professional sports analytics jobs in the United States. There are many more athletes than analysts. Just go down the list of the roster and scroll over to data science or team analytics. Pretty easy to figure out. You are competing against a huge number of people for a very small number of spots. We're at Carnegie Mellon. I've gone to other colleges and given talks, online, in person. Think of all the colleges around the country that have sports analytics. NFL jobs I post get between 50 and 100 inquiries in 24 hours. We had over 400 applications to a big data bowl program. We picked 12 people. You need to set yourself apart and get lucky. I got lucky for my current job. I was happy at the startup I was working at. I was not looking for a job at all. A friend of mine, thank you, Todd, DM'd me that this job was available. He said, hey, this looks like something you'd be interested in doing. He was right, but that was pure luck. If I didn't open that DM, I would not have this job. So some of that is part of it, to be clear. And don't expect you're just going to walk into any job, no matter how good your resume is, how good your experience is. Again, it's competitive. Be aware of that. The good news, I didn't work in sports for 30 years. Then I did, and now I'm a director of the NFL. So there is no one path. If you're a college student, you do not become the GM of the Dodgers when you're 23 years old, it's okay, right? Pump the brakes, you'll be fine. A lot of us got to where we are with these different paths, right? There is no one way to do this. There is no one way you have to do it. You can get there a lot of different ways. Sports analytics are one of the few places where public work is immediately visible by people who make decisions in hiring. And the work can be good and show potential. That's kind of how I got my start. Back when Ben Simmons was on the Sixers, I got my start because I got into an argument online. While I should have been working on my PhD, I was yelling about the Sixers. I wrote a pretty bad article for a public blog. I deleted it, it was pretty bad. I wrote a few more, got marginally less terrible at it. I became a full-time author, I'm free full-time author. Wrote some more, got a little better. Started working at Nylon Calculus, again, barely getting paid. I did one thing really well. I made one project that really stood out. I got noticed by the right people. I volunteered to make Darko. And by volunteered to make Darko, I mean the person who made that costume, who is a incredible worker on that, his data vision skills are pretty bad. And so I said, hey, this is terrible, let me fix this for you. And honestly, that is how I have my career, because I said, let me help you with this. I got a job at Stats Reform, working on NBA player value models. Wrote a paper there that did pretty well at Sloan. Worked well with the teams who were clients. And then I moved to healthcare after finishing my PhD. Got more experience, did more things, then again, got a really really lucky DM, and then I got this job. I also got my current job in a big deal because what I did when from college, when I wasn't planning on doing that full time. I was a pretty bad college athlete. I was very good at lifting weights in college, though. So I was good at the strength and conditioning part. I was bad at the playing the sport. So I liked that. I started coaching. I coached athletes at Cal. I did stuff at other schools. I became a researcher in that field, all on the side because it was fun and I liked it. What I did not know in 2007 through 18 is that in 2020, 21, 22, I would apply for a job that required human performance experience in addition to an epi PhD. Sometimes it just happens like that, but I put myself in a place where I could get lucky by doing cool things, right? People ask me how to get started in sports. Do cool stuff, share it, be nice, be curious, smart, and inclusive. That's it. And when I say do cool stuff, the first thing you do will be bad. It always is. You're going to get better over time. It's okay. You got to be bad for a while before you're going to get good. And then over time, you'll reach a point where you think you're good. You'll meet someone else, realize, oh no, I'm actually still bad. I've just moved up a level. And then you start it over again. I hire directly a lot of jobs at the NFL. Some of you may have seen me posting about it even. Let's talk about the skills I care about. So these are negotiable, and these are pretty much entry-level-ish jobs. So negotiable for me is some level of statistical knowledge. Again, I am not a statistician. Many of you in this room know more about statistics than I do. I need you to know enough not to be obviously wrong, and enough to self-learn when you need to. Uncertainty, probability are the two things that are probably the most useful. Some level of machine learning skills, up to but not including deep learning, are the things I care about. Are you comfortable with some of the basic, most common tools? Learn R, Python, and SQL. R and Python and SQL. All three, just do it, trust me. Some version control experience would be great, but I'm okay teaching you that. I'm way, way out on the outlier side of data visualization, how much I care about that. Practice that, be good at that. You can learn that for free, experiment, learn, go nuts. Arguably the more important stuff. These are mandatory for me, and I will not compromise on any of these. I need you to be a good communicator. Verbally, emails, PowerPoints, whatever. I need instant professionalism. On day one, I need to put you in front of the most senior person I can think of and know that you're going to be okay. I need certainty that you're locked in, you're not a liability during work, after work, whatever. This is huge. Trust is really, really important for us. I need you to love sports in general, not just the sport you're working in. Again, try reviewing 2,000 quarterback slides manually if you don't like this. It's a lot less fun. Okay, you're gonna have to love the stuff you're doing. I want you to be ambitious. I want you to be a hard charger. I don't want to hire people who just check things off a list I give them. Be an individual contributor. If I hire you, it's because I think you're good enough to be here and I want you to be part of the team. Quality team member person, no ego, no tempers, respect for coworkers, respect for players, really, really important. We don't have jobs if they don't exist. PowerPoint's here. So this is my last slide. I can't overstate how important it is to be a nice and good person in this field. Sports is a very, very small community, for better and for worse, for sure. There are people in this room that have helped me for free just because they can, and I hope they'll continue to do so selfishly. There are people in this room that I have helped, and I'm going to keep doing so as long as they want. My career in sports exists because I asked someone if they needed help, and they were willing to share the spotlight and say yes. That's it. That's essentially it. Again, so if we go back to this, right? Do cool stuff, share it, be nice, be curious, be smart, be inclusive. And with that, that's my presentation.